This is David Goldman, Asia Times Deputy Editor, speaking to you from New York City on the evening of April 1st. Well, the stock market is doing well, led by the kind of stocks which aren't affected by soaring input costs. That would include tech, particularly Chinese tech, which came roaring back overnight in Hong Kong and did very well in the corresponding ADRs in this session in New York, and entities like banks, which, as we've been discussing, benefit from rising long-term interest rates because they borrow short and lend long. But today I want to talk to you about why you should continue to own an asset which hasn't been performing terribly well in the last few months, and that's gold. And no, it's not an April Fool's story. Gold is a form of insurance against a catastrophic fall in the dollar. It's not a hedge against inflation. A lot of people seem to be perplexed that inflation is going up, and particularly inflation expectations are going up, but the gold price has been falling. If you look at the chart, you'll see that there's a pretty straight line relationship between the price of gold and the yield on Treasury inflation-protected securities. That's a kind of Treasury that pays you a coupon, plus the change in the Consumer Price Index as measured by the American Bureau of Labor Statistics. As the yield goes up, the price of bonds go down, and what that simply means is that investors are paying less for catastrophe insurance in the Treasury market, and correspondingly they're paying less for catastrophe insurance in the gold market. But it wasn't like that last year during the worst of the pandemic panic. If you look at the upper left on the chart, there's a very different trend line. Gold started to go through the ceiling, breaking the $2,000 level, while the Treasury inflation-protected securities yield fell to about negative 1%. Now, the problem with buying inflation insurance or catastrophe insurance from the U.S. Treasury is that it's kind of like buying shipwreck insurance from the captain of the Titanic. If the ship actually sinks, he's not going to be there to pay off. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the world decides that Joe Biden's Treasury is trying to sell too many Treasury securities to finance a deficit that we've never seen in peacetime, a deficit in excess of 1/5 of our gross domestic products, kind of thing you associate with tin pot third world banana republics. The Treasury market crashes, yields go way up, the housing market crashes, the dollar drops by 1/3, all quite possible. In that case, the Consumer Price Index would go down because housing, the way the government calculates it, is 1/3 of the Consumer Price Index. So the problem is, you're buying inflation insurance, or catastrophe insurance in this case, from the U.S. Treasury, and they get to say what the payoff is. In the case of gold, you're talking about a metal which has inherent value. So when things get really stressed, as they did last summer, that's the upper left-hand portion of that chart, gold does a lot better than other assets. And if we really have a breakdown of the U.S. budget deficit, which certainly could happen given the staggering levels of borrowing that this administration has proposed, that's what you want to own. Gold is like a lifeboat. You don't need it until the ship hits an iceberg, but if the ship does hit an iceberg, you better have already bought one, because at that point it's going to be too late. You don't look at the market price of your life insurance policy every day on the internet. You keep it tucked away in the drawer. So own a bit of gold, keep it tucked away, don't worry about the price. Someday it may come in very handy. This is David Goldman, Asia Times Deputy Editor, speaking to you from New York.